The day after interest rates went up, today the Treasurer and Shadow Treasurer went head-to-head here in Canberra at the National Press Club. There was our political editor Andrew Clennell, and Andrew's in the studio. Andrew, you tried to flip the questioning to Josh Frydenberg and Jim Chalmers to get a bit of clarity, at least in some of their answers, because repeated questions on what cuts might come, what other changes might happen, it really didn't elicit a lot of detail today.
Yeah, what are you really doing when the economic conditions are changing and you're going so small target? Can you believe we've only got 2.5 weeks left? How about that? Unless we have 2 weeks on top because there's a hung parliament. You're looking forward to that? Anyway, here we go. My question to Jim Chalmers and Josh Frydenberg. Why don't each of you tell us what you think specifically the other guy is going to do in terms of tax rises or spending cuts? Well, you've been saying Anthony Albanese is in charge of wants death duties, for example. Let's see if you say that here. And while you're at it, given we're talking about debt, can Jim Chalmers name the net debt? OK.
Thank you.
But you could mention the debt figure for 22-23, just putting it out there for you.
We might start with Jim Chalmers this time.
OK, well, net debt $715 billion for 22-23 in the budget that was just released. On the issue of what I fear from this government, I fear that they will continue to ignore this cost of living crisis. And I fear that this government will continue on the path that they've created for the best part of a decade now.
My greatest fear is that if Labor got over the line, they would revert to their natural instincts to tax more and to spend more. Instincts that were on full display when they thought they had the election in the bag last time.
The Treasurer there now, in response to your question, there was a moment of, I guess, positivity towards their opponents, which I was surprised about. They both said they respect each other. Jim Chalmers earlier in the debate...
I must have missed that bit.
He did. He said, I respect the Treasurer, and the Treasurer at the end said, I respect Jim Chalmers. I was surprised by that. But
there's plenty of niggle as well.
There was a lot more niggle than there was respect, and including at the start when Jim Chalmers had a crack over Josh Frydenberg's previous statements about who his political heroes are.
Yeah, he compared him to Margaret Thatcher. He said, your hero's Margaret Thatcher. Remember early in the pandemic, Josh Frydenberg was talking up reform. I think Scott Morrison quickly squashed that. In fact, he squashed it the day after Josh Frydenberg told the press club that he wanted to do supply-side reform like Thatcher and Reagan. So let's hear Jim Chalmers' side on that. And then I'm going to play Josh Frydenberg having a go back at Labor and Jim Chalmers and wanting to keep JobKeeper for longer.
From this lectern not that long ago, my opponent, who I respect, said that his hero throughout the pandemic is Margaret Thatcher. And Margaret Thatcher, of course, said that there is no such thing as society. Well, I couldn't disagree more. My heroes are the essential workers and the shift workers who did so much to keep the wheels of the Australian national economy turning throughout the course of this pandemic. And the reward for their efforts can't be another 3 years of working hard but still going backwards in this economy.
Now, the Australian people will go to the ballot box in just a few weeks' time. They will face a very clear choice between a coalition that has delivered more jobs and lowered the unemployment rate, and a Labor Party which, when they came to government, the unemployment rate was 4.4%, and when they left government, the unemployment rate was 5.7%. And a coalition that has steered the economy through the biggest economic shock since the Great Depression, leading the world with our recovery, and a Labor Party that got the big calls wrong, like on JobKeeper when Anthony Albanese said the economic roof would come crashing down when it was ended.
One of the points that you've been making over not just the last few days but for weeks is that the government has to be careful about simply running on saying, look how great we've been. And that was a point that I think Chalmers was trying to allude to today in the debate.
Well, they're having trouble getting off this Scott Morrison and Josh Frydenberg. And again, it's like they want a reward for the hard work during the pandemic. I can understand that. It's kind of a human quality that you would have. But if you want to win an election, you've got to come with an agenda, I think. And if Scott Morrison loses, I would say that his best chance would have been to have a bolder agenda. I guess the same will obviously be said of Anthony Albanese. So both going small target or more of the same in the government's case, that will be a subject of discussion for us on election night. There's no doubt about it. So I'm going to play you that sort of criticism from Jim Chalmers now. Josh Frydenberg says he wants a pat on the back. And I'll also play you when Jim Chalmers asked Josh Frydenberg a question.
Well, you've got to hand it to Josh. Even in the midst of a full-blown cost of living crisis, the most wasteful government since Federation, taking for the first time to an election $1 trillion in debt and almost nothing to show for it, and he's still managed to find a way to give himself a little pat on the back. How much, Josh, do the real wage cuts in your budget cost the average Australian worker this financial year?
Well, firstly, we're saying that wages will continue to rise. And there's about a $900 difference for somebody who's on average full-time earnings between what the wages would be and what the inflation rate would be. But as you know, they get $1,500 in tax relief from the 1st of July, so that makes up for that difference between the WPI and the difference between the wages price index and the inflation rate.